So yesterday was a long slate of games. Yesterday had a lot of games that impacted playoff hopes. It impacted a lot of teams' view on their own season in general. And one team who had the worst loss of the day by far was the Las Vegas Raiders, losing 48-9 in Kansas City. Now, that game came after the Las Vegas Raiders decided to have a little pregame chant on the Kansas City Chiefs logo. I don't know if I said that correctly. The Las Vegas Raiders did that on the Kansas City Chiefs logo. A Las Vegas Raiders team who, up to this point, has been the little brother to Patrick Mahomes' Kansas City Chiefs, has been the little brother to the Chargers, has been the little brother to the Broncos for about 15 seasons now. The Las Vegas Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, the LA Raiders, whatever you want to consider them in their history. The Raiders have been the absolute garbage dump of the AFC West, and they decided to have a pregame huddle on the Kansas City Chiefs logo, a team who has been to the Super Bowl the last 2 years and won 2 seasons ago. And handedly, they deserve to get beat 48-9. Now, this is just something that adds on to possibly the most embarrassing season that the Raiders have ever had in their team's history. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm a savant on Las Vegas Raiders, Oakland Raiders, LA Raiders history, but when you just look at everything that's happened with John Gruden's situation, with how badly some of these games have been played and how poor some of the judgment has been by some of these players over, obviously there's off-the-field issues that I'm not going to talk about, but there's on-the-field issues that obviously need to be talked about with this team. Now, let's just start with this whole pregame huddle thing, because obviously I'm not going to say that Derek Carr was the guy who made it happen, but I would assume he's probably a voice in that locker room that's respected. And I would assume that Derek Carr is probably one of the voices that said, let's go out on the Kansas City Chiefs logo, a team who has sunned us for 3 years now, a team who, ever since Patrick Mahomes took over, has made us beating us like redheaded stepchildren. We're going to go have a huddle on their logo to try to disrespect them and show them that we're going to beat them. Not only that with Derek Carr, but he is such a average to below average quarterback that at this point, I hate watching him play. I hate every time someone says that he is a good quarterback. This is coming off as a Derek Carr rant because everything that I've had pent up about Derek Carr and how poor of a quarterback he actually is, it's coming out right now. You're about to hear this 8 to 10 minute rant about Derek Carr. Now, not only do I think he's a terrible quarterback, I think he's going to get massively overpaid with his next contract. I think a team is going to put so many resources into trying to trade for him over this offseason that once the playoffs come around, either that team or the Raiders, whoever Derek Carr is playing for, is probably not going to be in the playoffs. It's probably going to be considered the disappointment of the NFL that season, and is going to be considering letting Derek Carr go at the end of the year. Because Derek Carr, like I said, is an average to below average quarterback. And somehow nobody sees that. Now let's talk about who's probably going to get Derek Carr on their team next year. There's a lot of teams right now who are average to below average teams who are kind of a quarterback away from being a competitive team. When you look around the league, you have teams like the Carolina Panthers. You have teams like the Washington football team. You have teams like the New York Giants. You have a lot of teams around the NFL right now who I would consider being about a quarterback away from making a playoff run. A team like the New Orleans Saints is, like a very decent quarterback away from being able to even say that they could be in the Super Bowl hunt. And with a lot of the news going around about certain teams like the Steelers, like the Browns, maybe even Atlanta. There's a lot of talk around the league about certain teams letting go of their respective quarterbacks. And with that being said, Derek Carr is probably going to be in the conversation for some of those teams in terms of replacing their current quarterback situation. Now, listen, I don't want this to come off as me saying that statistically Derek Carr does not put up numbers. Because if you ask me, that season in 2016, I believe it was, maybe it was 2017, where Derek Carr had an incredible season, I think he should have been the MVP that year. I think he put together a season in which he was one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You're talking about a guy who had a 1.1 interception ratio, 28 touchdowns, almost 4,000 yards, threw for about 64% completion percentage. He had 7 fourth quarter comebacks in that season and 7 game-winning drives. You're talking about a guy who was just one of the best players on the football field every single time he was on the field. And when he got injured, that Las Vegas Raiders, or actually at that time, Oakland Raiders team, completely deflated. And they were not able to go into the playoffs with a positive mindset because they had to start, I believe it was Matt McGloin against the Houston Texans, and they got boat raced in that game. And I will say, Derek Carr has had a few things go against him that are unfair. The Henry Ruggs and John Gruden situations, both in their own different sort of perspectives, were unfair for Derek Carr. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that the Henry Ruggs situation was unfair to Derek Carr because it doesn't really involve Derek Carr. But with that being said, Derek Carr did lose a talented player on the football field. Derek Carr lost a head coach who he had to put his entire faith in over the past few years. All of their arguments, all of their heated exchanges that they've very publicly had on the sideline. Those were moments that Derek Carr was remembered for over the past few seasons with John Gruden as his head coach. And when John Gruden got fired or resigned from the Las Vegas Raiders organization, a huge person that Derek Carr was putting a huge amount of trust in just ended up leaving and didn't really leave on the best of terms. And I think Derek Carr, that's not really fair for Derek Carr. That's not something that he should have to be tasked with as the face of this franchise. But with that being said, that gives no sort of it just doesn't give him an excuse to be a very... Derek Carr is a decent quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I understand what I said earlier about being average to below average. He's a decent quarterback. I will give Derek Carr some sort of props, but when you look at this last month and a half for the Kansas City Chiefs, really if you look at what they've done since week 4, you see a team who loses to Chicago. You see a team that loses to the Giants. You see a team that loses to Washington. You see a team who not only lost yesterday 9-48 in Kansas City, they lost about a month or so ago at home to Kansas City 14-41. Now, I don't necessarily know what Kansas City, or I don't know necessarily what Las Vegas saw where they felt comfortable going and having a pregame huddle or chant, whatever they were doing on the Kansas City Chiefs logo. I don't know what they saw in film a month ago to say that they would be confident in doing that. But in a season where your combined score against your main rival, the team who has owned the division the past 3 years, when your combined score in those 2 games is 23-89, you need to look yourself in the mirror and understand your quarterback is not getting it done. Your quarterback is not able to win the major games in your division that you need. He loses to the Chargers. The only division game that he has won so far this year is at Denver, possibly the worst team in the division. What is Derek Carr doing for his team that proves that he is moving the needle forward? Because at this point, I don't understand what he does anymore to make this team better. Now, if you look at what Derek Carr is going to be owed from a contractual standpoint over the next year or so, the 2022 season, his age 31 season, he's going to be owed about $20 million. That's not a whole lot of money for a guy to be, a average to possibly above average quarterback. I think if you have Derek Carr at that price point, you're a decent team. There's a lot of teams right now in the NFL who could use a $19 million quarterback who puts up statistics like Derek Carr puts up. With that being said, I think there's a few teams who would probably be perfect for Derek Carr. A team that I talked about earlier, the Washington football team. I think they have had a sort of magic around this Taylor Heineke situation, but it's obvious that Taylor Heineke is not a future franchise quarterback. Derek Carr has at least proven that he can maybe be a franchise quarterback at some point in the career of his lifespan. But I think if you put him in Washington, you give him a good offensive line, you give him a franchise who is trying to turn the page and go into this new era, Like next year, it's going to be the first year that the Washington football team not only doesn't have the name Redskins, but it's a new chapter for the Washington football team. And next year, when they have their new name, they have their new logo, they have their they probably get a new color scheme. They're looking to become a new franchise. And I think if you put Derek Carr there, you put him with weapons like Terry McLaurin, you put him with a decent offensive line, you give him a good defense, you give him a good head coach in Ron Rivera. I think those two would actually get along really well. I think that's a perfect matchup. You also think about other teams. The Steelers are going to need a quarterback. The Browns are possibly going to need a quarterback. The Dolphins might need a quarterback depending on what they do with Tua. The Colts might need a quarterback. The Broncos might need a quarterback. The Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Giants. I mean, the Vikings, the Lions, the Rams possibly, the 49ers. Like, there's so many teams that might need a new quarterback depending on how the rest of the season goes and the rest of the playoffs go. And Derek Carr is more than likely going to be not a Las Vegas Raider next year. However, if he does stay as a Raider, I just want to say this: like the Raiders have kid themselves for too long with this Derek Carr situation. I'm not saying that he can't be a championship quarterback. What I'm saying is are making him shoulder the load more than he is. Obviously, he's shouldering too much of a load. And I'm not saying that he looks uncomfortable. I'm not saying that he looks scared doing it. I'm saying that he's not capable of doing some of the things that the Las Vegas Raiders are asking him to do. They're asking him to be the most efficient quarterback in the NFL with how high of a completion percentage they expect him to do. They're also expecting him to put up big numbers. They're also expecting him to win games against the Kansas City Chiefs. They're expecting him to win games in the division. The way that they're asking him to play football and the way that he is actually good at playing football, it's just not a match. And that's why they're 6-7 after 13 games. And they're looking like one of the worst teams in the AFC when you compare them to the actual good teams in the conference. A team I would really watch out for in a Derek Carr trade over this offseason, and a team just to watch out for in general in terms of a conversation, would be the New Orleans Saints. They obviously did not put enough effort and resources into trying to replace Drew Brees. And I am in no way saying that Derek Carr can replace Drew Brees. I'm nowhere near saying that Derek Carr is Drew Brees. But what I will say is he was effective at playing a similar play style that Drew Brees did play in New Orleans while he's been in Las Vegas. Derek Carr gets the ball out of his hands quickly when he is good. He gets the ball to his open receivers. He gets the ball to playmakers and lets them do what they do best. And that is something that I think he would thrive with the New Orleans Saints.